Hi everybody and welcome to Voyage Fromage for the month of August, and our um, subject today is Italy. And a couple things. One, you'll have to forgive me, I'm sitting down outside at Cape Cod. I've got my dog next to me, so if I get distracted every now and then, I apologize. Also, he likes cheese a little bit, so if I feed him a bite, don't be shocked. In any case, for those who don't know, my name is David Robinson. I am the international cheese buyer for Formaggio Kitchen. And as always, when I do a lot of these talks with you all, I get to talk about people and places that are near and dear. And again, this is no exception. There's a couple cheeses in here that are really special to me, and the people who make them. But when I had to first think about this subject of Italy, which is such a broad category of cheese, I really kind of had to think about how these were. And as I kind of looked at the cheeses, I realized that there's a common thread with all of these. Now, if you talk about cheese in Italy as a whole, we are talking, a couple thousand years. They are responsible for spreading cheese through the Roman Empire into most of Europe. Granted, they're not the ones who invented cheese; it came from elsewhere. But because of the Romans, their technology, needed to feed armies, etc., they perfected a lot of cheese making, and they perfected cheese making in large quantity. And some of what we're doing here, some of what we're tasting, is certainly an aspect of that. So we're tasting 4 different cheeses today, 3 of which have their exact roots in mountain cheeses, and then the 4th will sort of gets tied into that a little bit in sort of in a roundabout way. And what I realize is looking into this and tasting, etc., is that even though you go into northern Italy, where 3 of these cheeses are from, they have a very similar, although different style of cheese making than you have in other mountain areas, particularly France and Switzerland. But they change things. They did their own thing. They're Italians, and so some of these cheeses they are old and they're new at the same time, which always kind of makes it fun. But the roots of these are sort of go back into Roman times or pre-Renaissance for sure. So, these are wonderful cheeses for pairing wine, pairing beer, whiskey as well. Today I'm drinking a Pigato. Lovely. It's just a really fantastic light wine from Liguria. Pigato is a native grape there. So, we're doing a little all-Italian snack here. So, again, 4 cheeses today. And how to link these together and how to talk about them is one, because there are similarities with a couple of these for sure. And the order that I go may not sound or may not be the exact order that you would think in terms of tasting. We're not going to go lightest to strongest. We're going to go a little bit more in the more common to slightly less common is how we're going to do this. So the first cheese that we're going to be tasting today is the Asiago Stravecchio. So it's interesting to talk about Asiago and eventually the Monteveronese Latte Vecchio that we taste, because those are very similar cheeses. But Asiago is a cheese that has made its way into the U.S. market. It's available most of the time, not all the time. You'll see Asiago Fresco, which is a very mild cheese. It has a lot of eyes in it. It can be nice. However, the problem with Asiago is that most of what we get in the States is fairly large production, and there are still small producers. But there's 2 types of Asiago. And so this is a Asiago Stravecchio, which means aged. And it's aged about maybe 12 to 16 months, somewhere in there. They do age it as much as 2 years and sometimes a little bit more. This is on the younger side, again, about 12 months. So, unfortunately, I apologize. This is going to be a little abrupt in the change of scenery, clothing, etc. So, when I actually recorded this the other day, it did not record. So we are tasting the second of our 4 cheeses today, and that is called Monte Veronese Latte Vecchio. So this is a cheese that is interesting for a lot of reasons. One is it's very similar recipe. It's almost the same. It's almost the same recipe as the Asiago Stravecchio. However, this is coming from a much smaller farm and family-run business. So, little history on that, just because they're wonderful. And the next cheese we're tasting, the Campomalga, is also from the same producer. This comes from a cheesemaker called La Casera Roccolato. So the Roccolato family, I believe it was Romano, was the founder of this. Were farmers, started making cheesemakers, and now this is the 3rd generation of family doing this. It is 2 brothers and a sister who run the business now. Giovanni is the head cheesemaker, his sister Letizia, and then Gildo is head of operations, is whatever. So it's a fairly small and not tiny, but a fairly small fromagerie that makes very traditional cheeses from this area, as well as experimenting and kind of having fun with a few other things. So, including, they make cheeses where they add saffron to it. They are doing some random blues that just don't exist in this area, but they also do these very traditional cheeses, in which Monte Veronese Latte Vecchio is one of those. So, like I said, it's similar to the Asiago that you tried. In other words, they're using multiple days, milkings, etc. So that's going to be similar. However, there's a few differences beside that really come into play here, and not just cheesemaker, but the animals they're using. They are using different cows, although I'm not sure. They were not telling me. They weren't clear. I wasn't clear exactly what types of cows they're using. However, there's a few differences. So Asiago is made just north of where Asiago is on the Asiago Plateau. Monte Veronese is an area that doesn't truly exist. So La Casera Roccolato is produced and made in the Lessini Mountains, or Monte Lessini, which I'm saying that just because there's going to be a fun little tie into that name. And so it's a little bit further south. The vegetation is different, the cows are different, and the cheesemakers are different. And the reason that I sort of say that this Monte word is important is because the word Monte Veronese is very misleading. So it's not located. It's north of Verona. It's not located in Verona. It is again the Lessini Mountains. And Monte Veronese has a sort of the use of the word Monte is sort of a double entendre. And the word Monte actually refers to the fact that you're using multiple days milkings, just like the Asiago. In this case, the Roccolato family strictly does 4 days. That is the way they do this. It is no different. They're always like that. It's not an either and or. It's always 4 days. And also because so Monte. So that's what Monte means. So while it sounds like this is a mountain cheese of Verona, that's just sort of a little play on words there. So the Monte part is the specific process, which I always think is interesting. However, so this cheese is different enough from the Asiago, flavor-wise specifically, where there happens to be, for lack of a better word, a little bit of tannin in this. There's almost sort of a slight. I'm trying to think of how to word this, because I did have when I first did this presentation, somebody asked a question or said that there's certain flavor profiles that they don't quite love, and sometimes they get it with these slightly aged Italian cheeses. And again, I equate it closely to a tannin. So there's a sort of little, it's almost like there's a reaction going on. It's almost a drying, and there's a little bit of spice in that finish that sort of does this. This is done on purpose. So they when they make this cheese, as with any cheese, the first thing you do is acidification, and you add starter cultures, and that helps do a couple things. Is It helps the milk to start coagulating a little bit, starts that process going. It also starts helping the sugars convert from lactose to lactate. But these cultures also have an effect on what your final cheese is going to be in some of the flavors. So you don't want a starter culture to dictate the flavor. However, a starter culture will help elevate certain things and maybe mute others, or in the case of like Swiss, it helps to produce the eyes. So in this case, the acidification, the cultures they're using are done in a way that actually help to keep the acidity level slightly higher than your average cheese, particularly this style, this age. Most mountain cheeses are not quite this acidic as this is, and it's done on purpose. Again, this is not by chance. So starter cultures, and this is something that they've been using the same starter cultures for years and years, which they've cultivated. Starter cultures, like any starter culture, they are using their own milk and they're using leftover milk from the previous day. So this flavor, this commonality for Monte Veronese is always present. So it's really fun because this has, well, this cheese is about, I think, 14 months. There's a little bit of creaminess, although not a lot. It's a little salty. There's that acidic edge, almost spicy in the end. And it's really, really fun. This is a great cheese to, again, make frico with, to grate onto pastas. I love to have this mixed in with ravioli fillings. If you mix it with potato or spinach and put it together, put in ravioli, it's really, really wonderful. It melts without melting. It's really fantastic. So there are, at this point, I believe maybe 5 or 6 producers of Monte Veronese left, or in total. It's not, sorry, left. It's never been a massive, there's never been a ton of production. So saying left is not correct. So there's never been a ton of production. Just the Roncolatos, to me, have kind of perfected this and made this better. This version of Monte Veronese of Latte Vecchio is far and away the most interesting to me. It's that I've had in a while. It's really good. It's very, very fresh, and it's really fantastic. And yeah, it's a wonderful family doing this, and it's a wonderful cheese. So I hope you all enjoy this. All right. So the next cheese we're going to be talking about is the Malga Campo, or Campo Malga, sorry. And this is also made by the Roncolato family, and this is an expression of a cheese that is rooted in history and tradition, but is a brand new cheese. They're the only people who make this cheese, and while it might be reminiscent of others, it's still their own product. So they the cheese that we just tried, the Monte Veronese Latte Vecchio, is made all year round, and when cows are basically in the valleys. But Roncolato practices transhumance, like a lot of farms do, and during the summertime they bring up into the highlands of the Licini Mountains. They practice transhumance and bring up their cows into higher pastures. So during that time, they make several cheeses, of which the phrase that they use is called malga. If you've tried or heard the word alpage in France, or alpeggio for maybe fontina, it has the same inference as malga. And what that means is that basically malga has two different meanings, but it's a local term for alpage. And so that implies that the cheese is being made at a very specific elevation. In this case, I believe they're at about 1,500 meters. In France and Switzerland, and even in Valdosta, where they make fontina, to be termed alpage or alpeggio, there are very, very specific rules for that. In Verona, where these are made, there's also rules, but they're slightly different. So again, it's not, I believe in Switzerland, it's a slightly higher elevation. And Here it's again about 1,500 meters. But anyway, so Malga has two components. So one is that it implies that it's an Alpage cheese. The second part of this component is that Malga is the actual hut that the cheese is made in these mountains. So, for hundreds for hundreds and hundreds of years, when you had cheeses that were made in high pastures, these were cheeses that basically the person tending the cows would then milk the cows, and it's done in the field, and then they would have a small hut or a small area where they could actually make the cheese, and then they would stay up. Oftentimes it might be a double room where there was a bed on one side and cheese making on the other, so they could sleep. Sometimes they're a little bit bigger. Sometimes in the case, what I've seen old drawings of the Malgas in this area is that literally the Malga, what was called the Malga, was just a room for making cheese. So now, fast forward to where we are today, the better technology, etc. However, there is still a dedicated small building and sort of small. I mean, these are tiny little spaces to make cheese in, and it has to be made in this. So Malga is the building, is what the actual building is called. So you have a double. It's a double-edged sword. So if you see the word Malga in this, you know that it is made in the summertime. So that summertime is they bring the cows up sometime in May, and they bring them down sometime in September. The reason that it varies, you don't know the exact dates, is because it's weather and seasonal dependent. So if it happens to be a longer winter and you can't get them up until mid-May, that's what happens. During the summertime, in September, it's all going to depend on the weather. If it gets too cold or if it's too dry and you start losing pasture, then you bring them down earlier. So even as this works, the cheese making for these Malga cheeses is minimal at best. One, they're making a couple different styles of Malga, this being their own invention. But when animals are this high in elevation, what matters is the grasses and where they're feeding, and more so it's slightly more pronounced than cheeses in the valley. If it's dry or too rainy, it affects their feed a lot. And by the end of the summer, as grasses start to dry up, regardless of how good the summer is, because there's a little bit less feed, the cows are starting to give a little bit less milk, and so you can only produce so much of this cheese. Now, Copper Malga is aged, I believe, about 8 months, anywhere between 6 to 8. A little bit longer, because this was made at the end of last summer. So we're talking probably we got it was probably about 11 months, and so this is probably about 12 months now, which is rare. This is the first time we've received this cheese at that age. And only the third year, that we've ever received it. It's sort of still new to our selection. It is marked by, if you look on the rind on the outside, it's sort of a yellowish waxy rind, because I believe they do put a little bit of paraffin on it, but that's because what they're going to do is then paint the outside, and they do a drawing on each wheel of cheese that is slightly different. It's generally just a picture of some trees, what looks like a table and a sun, or a little cottage, whatever. It's really kind of cool. But they hand paint each one to this day. They're making. If I believe what they told me, which sometimes it's always a little bit funny when you talk to cheesemakers in Italy, they fudge numbers a little bit. I believe that there are between 200 to 300 wheels that's made a year, and that's it. It's never more than that, and it could be less, but it's such a minimal. There's such a small amount, so they don't have a ton of it to age. They don't have a ton of it to sell, and we're really lucky to get it. So this recipe is more similar to what you see with Swiss and French Alpine cheeses. Is instead of doing the latte and taro style where they're combining, this is just a straight up, one day at a time. They cook the curds a little bit. although if you compare other cooked curd cheeses like raclette or Comté, those they actually cook the curds longer. The curds are cooked a little bit less, still at about the same temperature, which is about 140 degrees Celsius. But instead of doing this for 25 to 30 minutes, it's done for about 10 to 15. The exact reasons are still unclear. And you get some of the same effect, and some of that effect, the reason that you cook the curds, particularly with mountain cheeses, is you're looking for two very distinct characteristics. One is pliability. You get cheeses that like a wheel will bend a little bit, stays a little bit softer or creamier as well. Even if you age it, it has a creaminess to it, which it certainly does. And it's something that can melt. So while fondue is certainly not a tradition here, adding cheese and melting it into pastas and into as fillings or whatever is still super common. And so it's their idea is to use it in that realm as well. So they're not looking at copying France or anywhere else that has cheeses that melt well. They're looking for their own thing. Now, big difference from what they do is, whereas all the cheeses like raclette and Comté, Gruyere, etc., those cheeses are pressed. So when you cook the curds, you press them, you get these sort of denser cheeses that age well. Become very smooth. The Campomalga is not pressed, so it's cooked and not pressed, and so you end up with some holes in it, some eyes. You end up with a rind with a wheel that is slightly not flat on each side, and the effect is that instead of having this dense cheese like Comté, you end up with something a little bit kind of looser in a way. The texture ends up being really different, but it's really lovely. It's one of my favorite cheeses that we carry. We don't get a lot. I believe this year was the first year that we got Malga or Campomalga in the summer and not just the fall. There was sort of a let's do it, might as well. The relationship we have with the Roncolatos is lovely, and so if we can help, we only get a chance to order from them a couple times a year. So to take advantage of this now and get it was sort of just a lovely boon for us. So very excited that we were able to do it. All right, the fourth cheese we're going to be talking about is Calcagno. And the reason that I like the cheese with this grouping, and to me this whole grouping is maybe slightly not different from what we normally do, but the styles are not. They're all firmer for the most part. The cup is softer, but still these are aged cheeses. And so I was looking at the Campana or Calcagno, and I was thinking about this cheese for a while, and thinking, well, why is it related to these mountain cheeses? And so the reason that I have the reason why this is included to me, and the reason why it links in, and I wanted to do it last because it's the most different out of these. And again, it's not a singular cheese. There are, I believe, 15 different producers of this type of cheese. Is that it's a cheese that is interesting. So Calcagno is made in Sardinia, right? And the first person who made this cheese, I believe, in the 70s, was somebody who living in Sardinia, where oddly enough, most of the Pecorino Romano is made in Sardinia. It's known for their sheep milk cheeses. There are some goats, but basically it's known for its sheep milk cheeses. And Sardinians are known throughout Italy as being as some of the best Pecorino producers or cheesemakers in all of Italy. It's renowned. There's an old saying that if you want to know what Sardinian Pecorino tastes like, you go to Tuscany, where a lot of cheesemakers in Tuscany have Sardinian roots. Well, this gentleman in the 70s sort of set out to make a different style of Pecorino. Didn't want to make Romano, didn't want to do the typical Sardo cheeses, and decided to make what originally was called Gran Sardo. And it was a cheese where instead of treating it like a Pecorino Romano where it's going to be a little bit drier. He wanted to do this a little bit more like the Grana style that Parmigiano is a member of. Grana is generally cheese. It's cow's milk. They're 80-pound wheels. They're made in, the Parmigiano Reggiano is made in Emilia Romagna. Grana Padano is made north of there, and other Grana style cheeses are pretty much all made in the north where there's more cows. So he decided he's going to make a Grana style cheese, but needed to play with it. One, you have sheep milk, which is much higher in fat than cow's milk. So to do that, you have to play around and toy with the recipe a little bit. But he took this same approach in which you cut the grains of, the curds really small. So like about the size of a grain of rice. You're going to strain out all the way. You want no liquid left in that. You're going to put it into a mold. In this case, instead of doing an 80-pound or searching for an end result of about 80 pounds or 40 kilos, he was going for smaller. So his wheels basically cut that in half. So they were about 20 kilos. But he was looking for cheese that you could grate and use in the manner of Parmigiano that was different enough from Pecorino Romano. So he came up with Calcagno. So he did all those things. He started making exactly the same way, which means he's cooking the curds. He's using skim milk, which is not as common with sheep milk, particularly in that area, than it is for others, the other Sardo cheeses, and aging it for anywhere between 12 months on up. I believe he started doing 12, and eventually, when a few other people started to do this, it got increased with that. So he started making this. It was called Gran Sardo, and then a small cheesemaker and affineur based in Campania found the cheese, discovered it, started working with him, and then eventually a couple other producers of this cheese, and started to age it a little bit longer. This is where the name Calcagno came in. They renamed the cheese Calcagno, which is what took off. So you almost never see the word Gran Sardo anymore, at least not in this cheese. And so the affineur is called Casa Medallo. And the Medallo family is another, I believe they're 5th generation of cheese makers and affineurs. Again, affineur is somebody who ages the cheese, and they do both. So they were known, in Campania, they were known for making some Pecorino and buffalo milk cheeses. Their mozzarella is fantastic. And they started making other buffalo milk cheeses. Now they actually make buffalo milk butter. The Tozzetti that you're trying with all of these is made with the buffalo milk butter, their own buffalo milk butter, and they're really wonderful. I mean, they're like nothing else. They're rich, they're lovely, they're different texture than to me anything else of that ilk. They're creamy, or not creamy, that's not the right word. It's crunchy and soft at the same time. They're absolutely lovely, and they're a wonderful accompaniment to all these cheeses. But so the Medallo family was making cheeses. They were aging cheeses. They eventually They set up a second aging facility further inland in Campania, which is where this cheese is aged, and a couple others, where they found they could age it longer. They moved away from the coastline because their original, I believe the original aging facility was near Salerno in Elba, and then in Elba, and then they've moved out sort of into basically forest and international park area. So the Medallos started aging this cheese and started aging it longer and longer, up to 2 years. And have come up and really helped sort of solidify this. So again, at this point, there are 15 different producers of this, which seems like a lot, but none of these producers are large. They're all small scale. Sardinia is not a large island, and while sheep farming is an old tradition there, and most of the cheese made there is sheep, the amount of milk that's able to go to Calcagno compared to Romano or Fiore Sardo, etc., is minimal in comparison. So it's sort of a different product in that respect. There's just not a lot of it, And Calcanio is this really wonderful singular cheese, and I love the flavor profile. It has just a hint of tartness, almost lemony quality, and part of that reason is the fields that these sheep are grazing in are filled with lemon trees. Or lemon groves, and so they're not necessarily eating lemons. It's funny, they make there's a couple famous goat's milk cheeses from Sardinia that taste like lemon because the goats who will eat anything are eating lemons that are falling, whereas the cows are eating just the vegetation, but just the vegetation, including fallen leaves and etc. So while it's not lemon, there is a lemony quality to it that I always really love, and it's different. However, it's very, very savory, and like Parmigiano, the richness in this is exceeding. So it's really wonderful for grating. I find that with this cheese, I love to snack on it its own. It's really lovely. It's really wonderful. However, I will often buy a little extra of this, whether I need it or not, so that I can always have it in my refrigerator so I can grate it. And as an alternative to Parmigiano, it's really fun and it's really different. And if you talk about people who are lactose intolerant or have issues with cow's milk cheese, this is a great alternative that's not Pecorino Romano to add in those cases. It's absolutely lovely. But this is a cheese that I believe we started bringing in, oh God, probably maybe 24 years ago. And we would get these 40-pound wheels of Calcanio in, and they were a tough sell. That, it was hard to, even if it tasted good, it was hard to explain to people that having a Parmigiano-like cheese that's made with sheep milk is a wonderful alternative, and it's good to have both that and Parmigiano. And you can use Pecorino Romano as well. It's a different style cheese, but it works. So Calcanio sort of has come into its own a lot. It's a really, really lovely cheese. And so when to tie that in, I sort of started with this and then sort of faded away. My apologies. I tend to do that. But the reason why I say this ties it in is that Grana cheeses, and I'll use Parmigiano just to make that easier. Grana cheeses, while not specifically started in mountain areas, are what spawned, particularly in northern Italy, that style of cheese. It was some of the early cheeses made of cow's milk in northern Italy are what basically inspired these other cheeses. So the Asiago, which again is about 1,000 years old, that style the cheese we tasted earlier, Grana cheese was made before that, but it's what influenced these cheesemakers up a little bit north. And as necessity goes, they couldn't make 80-pound wheels of cheese that were large, so they cut them down a little bit. So then to go from here, Parmigiano, up north to Asiago and that style of cheese, to do that, and then take that sort of similar tradition which started up north and take it down south. It's a cheese that was born out of the same idea, the same ideals as some of those Alpine cheeses, just one different milk, obviously, different climate, different animals, but it sort of ties it together. It's really such a lovely cheese. The age of this to me is impeccable. It's really wonderful. I think that this is about 14 months old, and to me there's a sweet spot between 12 to 15 that I love, and this hits it. Again, wonderful to grate on pastas, anywhere else, but it's really, really lovely. Great with, if you can, taste this with Sardinian reds or Campania reds or whites. It's really mind-blowing how wonderful it is. It's just a lovely, lovely cheese that goes so well. And with that, I'm going to say thank you. I apologize if it's a little bit shorter than normal without having questions or the opportunity to take questions. I feel like I may have missed a couple things. I apologize if I do. However, if you were tasting these cheeses and you get a chance to look at this, and you have any questions, please let us know. Contact us. I'm more than happy to answer more questions about them. If I wasn't clear on something, please let us know. As always, I thank you guys so much for participating and hanging out with us, and hope you enjoy this, and I hope you enjoy the cheeses, and we'll talk to you again. Bye.